There are moments in life that split everything into before and after. One side of that line, things are one way. The other side, everything is different, and most of the time, you don't even realize you're standing at that line until you're already past it. What I'm about to share with you is one of those moments, a single conversation, and by the end of this, you're going to understand exactly why that one exchange changed the entire trajectory of a relationship that I thought was completely beyond saving. But first, let me ask you something. How long have you been carrying this? How long have you been lying in bed at night, replaying conversations in your head, trying to figure out where it all went wrong? How many times have you rehearsed what you want to say, only to have it come out completely different, or worse, never say it at all? Because if you're here right now watching this, I already know something about you. You care, deeply. And that caring is exactly what makes this so painful. Now here's something I want to be upfront about early on. We have a program linked in the video description below. I'm not going to spend this whole video selling you on it because honestly, if you need to be convinced that fixing the most important relationship in your life is worth your time, then this probably isn't for you. But if you already know something has to change, and you're tired of waiting for things to get better on their own, that link is there. It won't always be. And the people who act when they feel that pull in their gut are the ones who actually transform their lives. The ones who scroll past it are usually back here 3 months from now, in the same exact pain. So let's get into it. There was a point where two people, deeply connected, deeply in love, stopped truly speaking to each other. They were in the same house. They sat across from each other at dinner. They exchanged words about logistics, about schedules, about the mundane details of daily life. But actual connection? That was gone. And neither one of them knew how to name what was happening. They just knew something felt wrong. Like static on a line that used to be crystal clear. Does that sound familiar? That silence that isn't actually silence? That distance that exists, even when you're physically close? That's one of the most painful human experiences there is. Because it's not the loud, dramatic kind of pain. It's the quiet kind. The kind that settles into your chest like a weight that just never quite lifts. Here's what most people do at that point. They either fight louder, hoping that volume will somehow bridge the gap. Or they go completely quiet, retreating into themselves, building walls they tell themselves are boundaries. And neither approach works. Because the problem was never the volume of the conversation. The problem was the depth of it. Research consistently shows that the average couple waits over 6 years before seeking any kind of help for relationship problems. 6 years of quiet suffering. 6 years of small wounds accumulating. 6 years of emotional distance growing wider, one unspoken frustration at a time. And in that time, patterns get cemented. Habits of disconnection become the default. The relationship stops being a source of joy and starts feeling like just another obligation. I don't want that for you. So what actually happened in that one conversation? How did everything shift so dramatically in what felt like a single moment? It started with one person deciding to stop performing, stop saying what they thought the other person needed to hear, stop managing the emotional temperature of every single interaction, and instead, for the first time in a long time, just tell the truth. Not in an explosive way, not with accusations or blame, but with something that required enormous courage. Vulnerability. They said something like, I feel like I've lost you, and I'm terrified that's my fault. That's it. That's the whole thing. Simple, terrifying. True. And here's where it gets interesting. Because the other person could have responded defensively. They could have shut down. They could have matched that vulnerability with armor. But because of how those words were said, because of the energy behind them, something cracked open. And for the first time in what felt like forever, a real conversation happened. Now I want you to understand something critical here. That moment didn't happen by accident. It happened because one person had done enough internal work to know that the way they had been communicating wasn't just ineffective, it was actively destroying the connection they were trying to protect. And that shift in awareness, that moment of genuine self-reflection, is what made the difference. Most people think relationship problems are about the other person. And look, sometimes the other person is genuinely doing things that hurt you. But the people who actually transform their relationships, the ones who go from that suffocating disconnection to something that feels alive again, they all share one thing in common. They stopped waiting for the other person to change first. I've seen this pattern repeat hundreds of times. Couples on the edge of something breaking, only to discover that one authentic, honest, well-timed conversation was the catalyst for everything turning around. And conversely, I've seen people who waited too long, who let resentment calcify into something that couldn't be thawed, who said later, I'll bring it up later, until later became never. The difference between those two groups is not luck. It's not compatibility. It's not chemistry. It's the decision to act before it's too late. Now let's talk about what actually happens when communication truly breaks down, because I want you to feel how serious this is. When two people stop communicating at a real level, something physiological happens. Stress hormones stay elevated. The nervous system stays on guard. Sleep suffers. Concentration suffers. The way you show up in every other area of your life, your work, your friendships, your sense of self, all of it takes a hit. You start carrying the weight of the relationship into every room you walk into. And then there's the loneliness. That specific brutal loneliness of feeling alone in a relationship, of lying next to someone and feeling like they might as well be a stranger. That's a pain that people who haven't experienced it genuinely can't understand. But you might understand it right now, and I want you to know that understanding it does not mean it's permanent. Here's what's also true. When communication is restored, when that real conversation finally happens, the shift is almost immediate. Not perfect, not complete, but real. People describe it as breathing again after holding their breath for so long they forgot what air felt like. The tension in the body releases. Sleep improves. There's a lightness that returns, almost physically, almost overnight. And the relationship itself transforms in ways that are almost hard to believe until you experience them. Things that felt like massive conflicts suddenly become manageable conversations. Things that once triggered defensiveness start landing as honest concern. The entire dynamic shifts because the foundation shifts. But here's what nobody tells you about that process. It is uncomfortable before it is beautiful. That first honest conversation is terrifying. Your voice might shake. You might say the wrong thing. You might need to try more than once before it lands. And most people stop right at that edge. They feel the discomfort of beginning and they interpret it as a sign that something is wrong, when actually that discomfort is the sign that something real is finally happening. The people who push through that edge are the ones who send me messages months later saying things like, "I didn't think this was possible. I was convinced it was over. And now I cannot imagine our relationship being any other way." I'll tell you something else. The relationships that come out the other side of genuine repair, the ones that have actually been through the fire and rebuilt, those are the strongest ones. Not the ones where nothing bad ever happened, but the ones where something broke, and both people decided together that it was worth fixing. That's what I want for you. Not the version of connection you had at the beginning, which was beautiful but fragile because it hadn't been tested yet. Something stronger, something that knows it can survive difficulty because it already has. Now think about where you are right now. How much time have you already spent in the pain of disconnection? Weeks, months, years? Think about what your life looks like on the other side of this. What it feels like to come home and feel genuinely at ease, to have a conversation that doesn't require you to brace yourself, to feel seen, to feel understood by the person who matters most to you. That version of your life is not a fantasy. It's available to you. But it requires something from you now, and the first say that not to pressure you, but because the evidence is overwhelming. The people who invest in understanding themselves and their patterns, who actively learn the language of real emotional connection, see results in their relationships within weeks, not years, weeks. The people who try to figure it all out alone, scrolling, hoping, waiting, often spend years in the same patterns with nothing fundamentally shifting. The cost of staying stuck isn't just emotional. It's every holiday that feels like an obligation instead of a joy. Every conversation that drains instead of restores. Every day that passes where the gap grows slightly wider. Those days add up into years, and years are not recoverable. So here's what I want you to take away from everything I've shared with you today. One conversation can change everything, but only if you're willing to have it. And being willing to have it means understanding why your old ways of communicating haven't worked, knowing what to say and how to say it, and having the courage to begin. If you know that something in your relationship needs to shift, if you've recognized yourself in anything I've said today, the program linked in the video description below exists for exactly this moment. Not for people who are curious, not for people who might get around to it eventually, for people who are done waiting for things to change and ready to actually do something about it. The ones who reach that point, take action, are the ones who look back on this moment as the turning point. The before and after. Go check it out.